Congressman Paul, I want to show you the video that got the most votes of all the video questions submitted to YouTube, and this one comes, as you can see, from Brandy and Michael in Spencer, Indiana.
There's growing concern among Americans about the size and the scope of the federal government and its infringement upon state and individual rights.
If you're elected president, how do you plan to restore the 10th Amendment, hold the federal government only to those enumerated powers in the Constitution, and allow states to govern themselves?
Congressman, what's your answer for Brandy and Michael?
Well, obviously it would take more than one individual, but the responsibility of the president would be to veto every single bill that violates the 10th Amendment. That would be the solution.
Anything else there? You got a little time left.
Well, I'll tell you what, that is the subject that is crucial because government is too big in Washington, D.C. It's run away. We have no controls of spending, taxes, regulations, no control in the Federal Reserve printing money. So if we want government, whether it's medical care or whatever, it's proper to do it at the local level as well as our schools. But there's no authority in the Constitution to do so much of what we're doing. There's no authority for them to run our schools, no authority to control our economy, and no authority to control us as individuals on what we do with our personal lives.
Hi, I'm Stella Lohman from Atlanta, Georgia. I've taught in both public and private schools and now as a substitute teacher. I see administrators more focused on satisfying federal mandates, retaining funding, and trying not to get sued, while the teachers are jumping through hoops trying to serve up a one-size-fits-all education for their students. What, as president, would you seriously do about what I consider a massive overreach of big government into the classroom? Thank you.
If you care about your children, you'll get the federal government out of the business of educating our kids. In 1980, when the Republican Party ran, that part of the platform was to get rid of the Department of Education. By the year 2000, it was eliminated, and we fed on to it. Then we, as Republicans, added No Child Left Behind. So the first thing a president should do is the goal should be set to get the government out completely, but don't enforce this law of No Child Left Behind. It's not going to do any good, and nobody likes it. And there's no value to it. The teachers don't like it, and the students don't like it. But there are other things that the federal government can do, and that is give tax credits for the people who will opt out. We ought to have a right to opt out of the public system if you want.
I want to ask you a question about a comment you made a couple of weeks ago about a border fence with Mexico. Here's what you said, sir. I want to quote it. There's capital controls and there's people control. So every time you think of a fence keeping all those bad people out, think about those fences maybe being used against us, keeping us in. Question, Congressman. Do you know a lot of Americans who want to take their money and flee the United States of America?
There are some. All the candidates up here talk about repatriation of dollars. They've already taken them overseas. We're talking about trying to bring in $1.5 trillion because they leave our country because we make it uncomfortable. Too many regulations, too much taxation. They can't start business. They've lost confidence. Yes, when countries destroy a currency, they do lead to capital controls and they lead to people control. So I think it is a real concern. And also, once you have these data banks, the data banks means that everybody's going to be in the data bank. You say, oh no, the data bank's there for the illegals. But everybody's in the data bank. That's national ID card. If you care about your personal liberty, you'll be cautious when you feel comfortable. Blame all the illegal immigrants for everything. What you need to do is attack their benefits. No free education, no free subsidies, no citizenship, no birthright citizenship. And that would get to the bottom of it a lot sooner. But economically, you should not ignore the fact that in tough economic times, money and people want to leave the country. That's unfortunate.
Congressman Paul, thank you very much, sir.
Congressman Paul, you have said that you believe that life begins at conception and that abortion ends an innocent life. If you believe that, how can you support a rape exception to abortion bans? And how can you support the morning after pill? Aren't those lives just as innocent?
They may be, but the way this is taken care of in our country, it is not a national issue. This is a state issue. And there are circumstances where doctors in the past have used certain day-after pills for somebody with rape. And quite frankly, if somebody is treated, you don't even know if a person is pregnant. You don't even know if there's a disease. But if it's 24 hours after rape, I don't know how you're going to police it. So I don't think you should create. We have too many laws already. Now, how are you going to police the day-after pill? It doesn't make any sense to me in a practical matter. So I would say that nobody can outdo me on respect for life. I've spent a lifetime dealing with life, but I still think there is a time where the law doesn't solve the problems. Only the moral character of the people will eventually solve this problem, not the law.
Independent New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg recently fretted over the possibility of the unemployed rioting in the streets. Ohio's Republican Governor John Kasich recently said, quote, "For the first time in my life, I'm worried about this country." And recently a liberal columnist wrote this, quote, "We've lost our mojo." You know, President Obama promised hope and change, and according to many polls, fewer and fewer Americans believe he's delivered. Now, I'm not asking for your jobs plan here. What I'm asking for is, how are you going to turn this country around?
Government destroys jobs, the market creates jobs. So the government isn't going to be expected to create the jobs. They have to change the environment. But you can't do that unless you understand where the depression, recessions come from. And you can't understand that unless you know where the bubbles come from. I've been arguing this case for 20 years and warning about bubbles and housing bubbles and NASDAQ bubbles, and a lot of other economists have been doing the same thing. Until we understand that, you can't solve the problem. You have to deal with the Federal Reserve System. You have to deal with free markets, and you have to deal with the tax program and the regulatory system. Then you can get your jobs, because the people will create the jobs, not the government.
If you had to choose one of your opponents on the stage tonight to be your running mate in the 2012 election, who would you choose and why? And why would this person help you make the country better?
Again, if you had to choose a running mate, one of the people on the stage with you, who would you choose and why? 30 seconds down the row. Governor Johnson. Sorry.
Well, that would be the guy 3 down, Congressman Paul. And that would be the notion that this country is about liberty and freedom, and that right now we are facing an extraordinary crisis, that if we do not address it now, we're going to find ourselves in a monetary crisis that is going to leave us all with nothing. And if we want to look at an example of that, that would be Russia, that experienced a monetary collapse that in our lifetimes may never require. We need to avoid that now.
I don't plan to make a choice at the moment, because I am on national polls. It seems like I'm in 3rd place now. I think it would be inappropriate. As soon as I'm one of the 2 top tier, then I will start thinking along that line. But right now, I'm going to defer and just work very hard and make sure that I stay in the top tier, and then eventually be one of the top 2 contenders.
Texas Congressman Ron Paul. He joins me now. How are you, Congressman?
Thank you. Doing well.
The last time you ducked me, we asked you to be on the program, and I saw you doing an interview right next to me. I'm glad you came on this time.
Well, I did have another appointment that night, with my supporters. I have enthusiastic supporters.
Oh, you have the most enthusiastic supporters.
So I couldn't let them down. I feel very obligated
But
to
you
them.
were sitting right next to me doing an interview when you were supposed to be here.
You have a better memory than I do, so I don't recall exactly.
By the way, you know where your son Randis was today? He was on Air Force One with President Obama.
The only time I went on Air Force One, it was with Ronald Reagan.
Is that right?
I got to talk to him about the gold standard.
Well, listen, you see the price of gold? Look, I was thinking about you. A lot of what you say, the role of government has gotten way out of control. They want to control every aspect of our lives. When you get into those libertarian principles, I agree with 95% of what you say.
That's pretty good.
All right, pretty good. For example, look at Bernanke and QE 5000. And, you know, I don't think it's going to work.
Right.
I think it's government involvement. Your thoughts on what he was proposing earlier this week?
Well, it's just more of the same, and that's all they know, and that's all Bernanke knows. If you study his history, all he said, he did all his research on the Depression, and he said the Depression wouldn't have lasted if they'd have printed more money much, much faster. But he didn't realize that they printed too much money in the 20s, caused the bubble, and that's how we got the Depression. So Greenspan started it by keeping interest rates too low. That was first QE. Then they had the emergency. Then they had the QE2. And then he said, we're going to keep interest rates very low until 2013. Now he's come up with another one. And the only thing he's ever offered is printing more money. And when you do that, you distort the market. The most important thing in a market is to have prices. Everybody knows wage and price controls are very, very bad. But we constantly accept the notion that the Federal Reserve can fix the price of money, and that's his interest rate. And it is key to the problem. Unless we deal with that, you can't deal with the problem of unemployment and savings and capital and all these things. That's why the monetary issue is so important.
You know, if you look at what Obama's doing, massive government stimulus, that fails. Massive government debt and deficits, that's hurting the country. Massive regulation, all these things you would fix. And you know, I think you and a lot of the people up on that stage tonight were right. The only thing I always find myself in disagreement with you, and I don't understand, I want to really give you a chance to explain this. Why do you think we have no business or role in preventing a madman, Holocaust-denying guy like Ahmadinejad that wants to wipe Israel off the map, repeatedly states it, an enemy of the United States? Why do you think we shouldn't involve ourselves early before he gets a nuclear weapon?
Well, first, we don't have the authority. Second, we don't have the money. Third, it hurts our national security. And fourth, I think it hurts Israel for us to be doing all those things.
What do you mean we don't have the authority? Whose authority?
I mean, where is it written in the Constitution that we should be the policemen of the world?
It doesn't say that.
No, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So
but we have the right to defend
George
ourselves.
Bush? George Bush had it right in the year 2000. Remember, he said, I don't want to be a nation builder. I don't want to be involved in policemen of the world, because he didn't like what Clinton was doing in Kosovo. So I just stick that. The founders preached that message. Don't go about the world looking for monsters to destroy. Besides, we don't have the money is the most important.
I think that's really important. But is it a case that if we don't deal with certain threats now, we'll deal with them later? For example, as we watch the expansion of Nazism, you know, eventually, obviously Pearl Harbor played a big part, but we were a part of beating back the forces of fascism and Nazism. Maybe had we gotten in early.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have to look at potential threats down the road and realize that if somebody says they want to destroy you, you got to believe them?
Yeah, but that's all war propaganda. We did that to go into...
No, Ahmadinejad says it. He wants to destroy Israel and the U.S.
Yeah, but so did Khrushchev say that he wanted to bury us, and he had a capability of doing that.
Yeah.
Iran is not a threat in a true sense of the word.
They have really believe that?
Let me finish the sentence.
Yeah.
They have a lot of oil, but they have to import gasoline. They don't have intercontinental ballistic missiles, and people like others, and maybe you're willing to go in there and aggressively attack a country, and they don't even have a weapon.
You know why I am, and this is just a disagreement we have, because when he says he wants to annihilate Israel, his ties, he's fighting proxy wars against Israel right now by funding Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad, the Muslim Brotherhood. They are already fighting a war against us in many ways and Western values, and it's just a matter of us recognizing it.
But if we'd have followed George Bush's foreign policy and Ronald Reagan, he said that he left after Lebanon and the chaos. He says, those politics up there is so irrational.
Yeah.
He said that I made a mistake. He brought the troops home, and he said that if he'd have been more neutral in that area, those 241 Marines would have been still alive. So Reagan had second thoughts about it, and the founders preached it. And I think it's going to undermine our defense. I think what we're doing here
it may not come to that.
I think what we're doing is very dangerous to Israel. You know, this big fight in the United Nations. What are we doing with the United Nations? Why are they helping us make these decisions?
Why are we even in there? Why are we funding it?
I'm for getting out of it. The United Nations started that mess in 1947, and they've compounded it ever since, and they're still
we agree again.
There we go.
Hey, come back, spend more time with us.
Someday.
Always good to see you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Your brother, your son Rand is on my radio show tomorrow, so we'll see him then.
Oh, okay.
I want to hear about this trip with Obama.